Hi there, this is Susanne Knabe-Nicol, creator of Police Science Doctor. I wanted to put a series of videos together that summarize each of the talks that took place at the Society of Evidence-Based Policing Conference 2020. The Society of Evidence-Based Policing usually holds an annual conference that takes place in person somewhere, but due to the pandemic, the years 2020 and 2021 had conferences that took place online and were able to be viewed and attended by anyone from around the world, and all the sessions are free. But I thought I'd help you decide which session is for you by giving a brief summary of each of them. So let's get to the first summary. So the Society of Evidence-Based Policing was founded by Alex Murray. He's now a Met Commander at the Metropolitan Police in London. He was Assistant Chief Constable before then in West Midlands. And he's doing some really great work because it inspired a lot of other people to do similar things. So we now have a Society of Evidence-Based Policing in Canada, in America, and Australia and New Zealand. But Alex was the one that founded the first one. This is the website that I was basically showing you just a moment ago. And the first talk that I'm going to summarize for you today is by Professor Jon Bannister. He works at the Manchester Metropolitan University, and his talk is called Data as an Asset in the Fight Against Knife Crime. Now, I just want to be very clear here that for some people, when they hear the word data, and that's, I have to admit, that might include myself as well, it is a bit off-putting. But you will see as I talk you through the content of the session that basically it just means trying to understand what's going on. You need data for that, okay? You can't make any informed decisions if you don't know what's going on, and data helps us do that. So actually, what he's talking about in this session is not boring at all. Basically, he's talking about research that they conducted in response to dramatic increases in knife crime that we saw. And the question is, how can data assist in tackling helping law enforcement tackle these problems? Police are data rich. They have a lot of information on their systems, but they're information poor. And that is because they don't know what to do with that data. And that is why a session like this is very important. Forces in England and Wales provide annual data returns. So they're getting asked what their numbers are on certain types of crime, for example, by the Home Office, and they need to return that annually. So these annual data returns are called ADRs. But these ADRs do not necessarily support strategic decision-making. This kind of data collection just answers the what question, what is going on? But we still don't always have the answers of why is it going on, who's doing it, and how. Now, the data returns from Greater Manchester Police, okay, so they were involved in this research. They're not actually included in the national picture of these data returns that the Home Office gets. And that's because there was a worry that their data is flawed, that their data is wrong. And I'll get to that a little bit later. Because their knife crime counts seem to be stable and even dropping when everybody else's and other forces around the country were actually rising. So that's why it was thought there's an issue with their data collection and their data processing, and they were not included in the national picture. So GMP, that's Greater Manchester Police, in 2007, because of that, they decided to start a manual counting procedure, which involved the analysis of a number of text fields. Now, if you've got a policing system, there are certain tick boxes, there are certain things you can tick that are either or messages or fields, and they're much easier to analyze automatically by the system than free text boxes. If you're actually typing something in, it means that you need to have some kind of automatic system that understands the text or goes through the text and looks for certain keywords, or you've got someone who needs to go through it manually and actually read everything. But that's what they did because they wanted to sort out this data issue. In 2017, they started going through a manual process, and they used information provided in, for example, the modus operandi field, where somebody had to type in what the modus operandi of an offense was, and some other additional text fields to do that. And so the aims and objectives of this study that Professor Bannister was presenting in this video are basically to evaluate the efficacy of these counting methodology, and also to see if that could be automated, because obviously manual counting, manual trawling through lots of free text fields on a crime system is very resource intensive. And also what is actually going on with knife crime. You know, what is the extent of it? What are the trends? How can we understand it better? So these are things that I'm sure many people, including yourself, will want to know. So even though we're talking about data, we're actually giving you information. Okay, we've got the data and we want you to have the information. So the paper was evaluating how this could work, and this is basically what they've come up with. So you see here the information that he's provided. The methodology that was used was that of a convolutional neural network, deep learning text mining algorithm. I don't actually understand that much about neural networks, but a text mining algorithm is basically a program that automatically goes through text fields and extracts certain information based on the words it's looking for or finding. So these algorithms search through text data and identify references to, for example, knife or whatever the analyst has put in to search on. They then are tested on they tested a number of algorithms to find which one works the best and compared them to human manual reviews, just to make sure that they can establish an accuracy rate. So the manual reviews were used as the accuracy level. The first algorithm that they came up with matched the human assessors 87%, which is not bad, but it would have been higher if the data recording had been better, and also there were some other issues with the text fields. The second algorithm they came up with took into account the context of what was written in these text fields, and the accuracy increased to 91.2%. So that's the algorithm they then went with. So you can see on this slide here, looking at the red line, that's the data that the Greater Manchester Police provided to the Home Office, that the crimes seem to be dipping in 2016-17, which is why the Greater Manchester Police data were excluded from the national picture. So when they then used the text mining algorithm retrospectively, that's the green line, it established that knife crime had actually been going up. So there was definitely an issue there. So there were much higher counts, and that's what you can see in the green line. Now, if we're looking at these two graphs, that's one showing the makeup of knife crime in 2015 on the left and 2018 on the right in comparison. If you're looking at the numbers in the bottom right corner of each of those graphs, so N is the count, is the number 3,278 in 2015, 6,196 knife crimes in 2018. So actually, knife crime almost doubled in those 3 years, but the proportions stayed pretty similar. Green, for example, is possession, robbery is blue, serious violence is red, and then you've got different shades of red. So violent offenses dropped, but possession offenses rose. So you can see that in the 2018 data. There's a smaller part that is red, which is the violent offenses, but a bigger part that is green, which is the possession data. Now, counting or creating a crime, registering a crime for knife possession is something that the police do. So they may have just been a lot more active doing stops and searches or doing crackdowns and finding a lot more knives. It doesn't necessarily mean that there was more knife carrying going on. It was just meaning that police were detecting more. So that could have been police initiated rather than reflecting offenders' behavior. And about 10% of knife crime is flagged as organized crime group related. So that is not responsible for the knife crime rise in Greater Manchester Police, because that was pretty consistent in 2015 and 2018, those 10%. Now the next slide is looking at knife crime hotspots. So this is Greater Manchester area, and where you've got the hotspots is Manchester, not surprisingly, the biggest town in that. So we're looking at the where now. Where was knife crime happening? It was mainly in Manchester, and 2/5 of all knife crime takes place in the poorest neighborhoods, even though they only represent 1/5 of all neighborhoods, which means, and that has actually remained stable between 2015 and 2018. So there's significant area-based inequality, which again, we have seen in other contexts as well. Now, when we look at when, the overall peak is the evening or to early hours of the morning, but that varies by offense type. This next slide is looking at known offenders and victims. So on the left, we've got offenders. On the right, we have victims. And what we're finding is that offenders are mainly male and young, 15 to 19 years. In terms of age bracket, that's 25% of all knife offenders in 2018. And that's 5% more than in 2015. So the proportion of 15 to 19-year-olds in those offenders has gone up by 5% in the last 3 years, which means that knife crime offenders are getting younger. That age bracket makes up 44% of known robbery offenders. The ethnicity of offenders is proportionate with regards to demographics of the neighborhood. So it will be in line with where it's taking place, really. The characteristics of victims and offenders are largely the same, although females are more likely to be victims than offenders. 60% of victims live in the 20% of most deprived neighborhoods. And the 15 to 19-year age bracket also accounts for more victims now than before. The next slide deals with alcohol and mental ill health. I do like that Professor Bannister used the term mental ill health, because people always say mental health as if that was a negative thing. Mental health is actually a good thing, just as physical health is a very good thing. So we're talking about mental ill health here. And we're looking at serious violence, robbery, and possession. That, let's say that sand-colored tranche is no alcohol or mental health issues. The yellowish bit is alcohol only, red is mental health only, and blue is both alcohol and mental health. What they found here was that vulnerabilities of knife crime offenders, as it is split up here, for serious violence, for example, so that's the first circle that we see, almost half of offenders had alcohol and or mental health problems. That's quite a lot. These figures are probably too low, because the real numbers are probably going to be much higher, because how many of our offenders are actually properly diagnosed? Then Professor Bannister was looking at metropolitan area comparisons. So let's look at the left graph here. Greater Manchester Police is green, West Midlands Police is blue, and London is yellow. So they're relatively similar in terms of trends, but West Midlands Police and Greater Manchester Police started to fall and rise again before London did. So the most likely factor contributing to the acceleration of knife crime, Professor Bannister surmised that it might be things like austerity measures that perhaps disproportionately affect young people. So the public services are withdrawn, but also there was a reduction in policing. Now, I hope that you found this useful in some way, and if you have an interest in finding out more and actually hearing from the professor about his own research, then please do go and watch the session. I've linked to it in the text. You'll be able to find it. You'll be able to watch it for free. Like I said, the SEBP conferences from 2020 and 2021 are accessible for free. And all I'm trying to do with these summaries is try and give you a heads up of what awaits you. And if that is indeed an area of interest to you, please do go and watch the whole video. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.